looking for the digital transformation or any other track, then you're the wrong route. If some of your friends are looking for India innovation in Aura 1, you need to tell them that Deutsche Bank, Amazon, and now he works with Google. So, Abhishek Pandey. Next. Yeah. We have Mr. Ravi Narayan. He's a senior advisor, Startup Genome. He has been a pioneer, advised corporations, implemented governments. He's advised corporations, governments, implemented startups and in different innovation programs. He has helped Microsoft build their accelerator program for China, Israel, Europe, India, and US. He's also been the founding chair of Pan IIT in Washington. So yeah, warm welcome, sir. Third, we have Mr. Nitin Chaturvedi. He is the Group Chief Digital Officer at JSW. Nikhil is from IIT Dhunbad, 1993 batch.
Okay.
Next, we have Mr. Atul Batra. He's again a startup advisor, member of the Indian Angel Network, Alpha Fund. He has spent a lot of time as the CTO of Algonomy, which was previously called Manthan. He's been the chairman of the NASSCOM Product Council and also been a member of the NASSCOM's Executive Council. So, thank you for joining us. And lastly, we have a moderator, Dr. Shailesh Kumar. He's from Samsung. Shailesh has more than 20 years of experience in developing computer graphics software. He likes working in virtual reality, augmented reality space. You can call him an expert in 3D graphics, computational geometry, and OpenGL.
Black.
Thanks, Shailesh, for coming here. So Shailesh will moderate the discussion and post that we'll have some audience questions where we can interact with the panelists.
Thank you for the introduction. And hey everybody, welcome to the session on cutting edge innovation. And I'm honored to be with these esteemed panelists, and we will we hope to bring together a discussion on how cutting edge innovations are relevant for India's journey in this decade. So when I looked up the definition of cutting edge innovation, I found that this is different from normal innovation. While normal innovation is an iterative improvement of existing technologies, cutting edge innovations are the groundbreaking and revolutionary ideas and advancement at the forefront of technology or ideas. So think of normal innovation as refining and cutting edge innovation as pushing the boundaries into uncharted territory. And by the way, this definition is by the current cutting edge technology ChatGPT. That's what I looked upon. And now, since this track is on India and innovation, so I checked upon how is India doing on the innovation front. So there is something called Global Innovation Index, and currently India is ranked 40th out of 132 economies, which is a good improvement from where we were a few years back. 81 ranked 81 in 2015. So we are stepping ahead and trying to catch up with the tech superpowers of the world. And as we strive to become the $5 trillion economy by 2030, this decade is going to be India's decade in technology, or may I call it India's decade. And we need to discuss the role that we in the tech sector can play in shaping India's future in this decade. So with that, I think the purpose of this panel discussion is to discuss on the problem statement of thinking cutting edge innovation from the point of view of nation building. So with that, I would like to start throwing the questions at the panelists. I'll start first with Atul. So what, and you have been involved with startups, you have been involved with big tech, and you have been involved with academia also, I believe. So what do you think are the 5 cutting edge technologies that will define India's decade?
Thank you. I don't know if I can boil it down to 5 technologies, but I do want to make the point you talked about, what's happening globally. And today, technology is front and center to nation building. And there's a big clamor in India, as you know, around building what's called sovereign technology, right? And so I think it becomes very critical for us to start building our fundamental technology stacks, right? And by the way, that doesn't mean that we shun global technology, because a lot of people are have a very nationalistic view and say, I don't think that's a viable option, because to be world class you have to compete with world class, right? So we should embrace global competition, including in our country. Now, on the innovation front, I've been, as you mentioned, I've been working with startups for a number of years. A lot of times we make a comparison to US, China, Israel. May not be a fair comparison. I mean, if you take a step back, our startup product ecosystem is no more than 10-15 years, formally. I mean, how old is Flipkart and all, and much of it was B2C. Now we're seeing a lot of B2B, deep tech, SaaS and all of that, right? But fast forward today, we do have, I think, 80 to 100 companies that are north of $10 million revenue. Let's use revenue as the real metric, right, for success. So I think things are moving. Now, are we fundamentally innovating? Google came up with Gemini. Can we build that in the next few years? Those are good questions, right? So those kind of disruptive innovation, right? New foundational model, new drug discovery, etc., right? Things are happening in pockets, but if you ask me, the big opportunity, I think if you look at the whole slew of deep tech, obviously AI has been probably half to 2/3. If you look at from a metric of how many startups are building on some of these technologies, but if you look at robotics, drones, quantum, the whole list, right? I think there's tremendous opportunity. I feel the global opportunities. Obviously we've seen successful B2B companies going after the mid-market SMBs, but for the enterprise, that's where the money is. So I think we're starting to see a lot of companies now building on these foundational technologies and going after the enterprise market, and some of them are 100+ million revenue, some are several hundred million, right? And very focused on the enterprise. I think across verticals, right? Obviously, BFSI banking has been an early adopter of a lot of this technology, retail, right? And then bunch of industries. We were just talking about manufacturing, being a big candidate in India, right? So I think today India is a apps, ecosystem. We are not very deep, but I think that is set to change. The other last thing I'll mention is, in terms of India opportunities, what we call the India class problems. If you look at education, you look at healthcare. Like if you look at healthcare, how much of our population has access to a hospital or a doctor, within 100 kilometers? It's astounding. I forget the number, right? So I think we can use a lot of medical devices, do your own diagnostic and or remote monitoring, and also there's a lot of technology being built out. Education, right, through generative AI, to get private tutoring on a smartphone in a village, right? So I think those are game-changing things, and those are happening. And if we look at a very good example, how many people here use DigiYatra? I mean, one of the most phenomenal use cases globally, right? I mean, if you walk, sometimes through Bangalore airport, you don't even have to take out a document. You're sitting in the plane through DigiYatra, right? Amazing. And now I heard the US is planning to implement that, right? During the pandemic, I had my biggest wow moment. And when, my dad is ex-army, for his pension certificate, typically you have to go to a bank, do some documentation, they'll verify you, and then the letter gets sent to the pension authority. It's a huge workflow. Through a blink on an app, right? The life certificate was generated, sent to through the process to the workflow to multiple authorities and done in a few seconds. I mean, remarkable. And the adoption of, I think it's called Jeevan Praman, I think has been 5-10 crores if I remember at that time, right? So this is large-scale adoption of disruptive technology, that's happening in India. And of course, the examples are numerous. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks Abdul for your insights into the work that is going on in the India tech sector. This question is for Nikhil. So you represent the manufacturing and infrastructure, and that is one sector that the government is also putting a lot of focus on in terms of innovation initiative with the Make in India initiative. So what are the kind of technological innovations or cutting edge technology, if you want to stick to the theme, that that JSW is trying to solve or do some groundbreaking research, or if you can talk about the gaps that are still there that needs to be bridged with some technological innovation in this sector.
Okay, good morning everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. Before I answer your question, I would like to share a few insights from customers' point of view, because in several tech events we see new technologies being displayed and demonstrated by tech companies from the innovators and sellers' point of view. But my perspectives that I'm going to share here are from customers' point of view who are actually adopting those solutions. And probably that will help in answering your question. Second thing, the framework that we have for digital innovation or technology-based innovation at JSW Group is that we look at technology in a very integrated manner. As you would see, there are several silos in terms of IT, digital, and plant or process automation, right? For several years, these have worked as silos, and integrating them is really an uphill task. So we have been consciously working on bringing all of these three components together and looking at IT, OT, digital in an integrated tech manner. So that is something that many tech companies forget or don't take that perspective because they are focused on their particular silo. Thirdly, the third principle that we use is very stringent evaluation of every technology from business value point of view. So we have committees that would look at every particular new idea and they would try to see what would be the recurring business value over a long period of time, right? Without which the technology will not get adopted and implemented, and it will just remain a proof of concept or a POC kind of solution. So this is the basic guiding framework under which we work. Now to answer your question, yes, there is a lot of thrust from government side, and not just from government side but the manufacturing industry itself in trying to become better in adopting new technologies. JSW for very long, before IT and digital became so prominent, we have been very innovative in adopting new technologies, especially in steel manufacturing. So for example, there are technologies which were not adopted by anybody in the world, and we took them up and developed our steel manufacturing plants using them. So yes, there is a thrust from government, there is a thrust from our side, and as our chairman has several times in his public speeches said that digitalization and sustainability are the two most important pillars for us. So now to answer your question, where is the gap? The gap is not so much in terms of technology, but the gap is more in terms of the capability for energy, natural resources and manufacturing companies to adopt them. Because there is limited budget, there is limited bandwidth available. So we have to choose those technologies which should be easier to implement and provide good enough business value and ROI in a shortest possible duration. In terms of adoption or types of technologies, I would say all of them that we see here in this event and what we talk about, right from data sciences, big data management, AI, ML, cloud, on-prem and edge adoption, metaverse, etc. All of them are at different stages of implementation and adoption right now. So as we go through the conversation, I can share some more insights on exact adoption.
Thanks, Nikhil. And I have some follow-up questions that I'll ask you on some of the areas that infrastructure and manufacturing can leverage technologies. But I'll come back to you on that. Now to you, Ravi, you have been involved with a lot of startups and you have mentored a lot of startups. And you would have seen India's startup ecosystem change over last couple of decades maybe. And you would have seen how the global startups have come up, especially from smaller countries like Israel, and we are still not up to that level. I mean, people still ask, why don't we have an Apple or a Google from India? I mean, before we reach there, we don't even have companies of the level of what Israel has produced, especially in the deep tech and B2C areas. So, do you want to elaborate from that point of what you have experienced so far, and any changes that you have experienced or seeing now?
Yeah, thank you, Shailesh. Over a period of last 18 years, I think the startup ecosystem has evolved to taking on small problems to solve to taking bigger and bigger problems to solve. So we see that maturity amongst entrepreneurs now to say, you know what, I don't need to do something which is going to just take about 6 months to solve and build a product around it. If it even takes a longer time, I'm happy to delve into it. And also the ability for the ecosystem to support them, including the financial support, has also become a little bit more robust in taking risks and being able to make this happen. So when I was running Microsoft, there was an interesting phenomenon I noticed. Microsoft was startup, sorry. One was, there was China, which we were helping startups in. And startups were very clear that they were just going to build something for China alone, because that in itself was a large enough market. Problem statements were interesting enough for them to solve, and they could build, very, very large companies just in China alone. But if we looked at Israel, they knew from day one that they were just going to solve for the world. There was no market in Israel per se at all. And therefore, they leveraged whatever technologies were coming out of their labs, which they have some phenomenal labs there, and also labs that come from the army, where they actually get to do something very, very cutting edge because of the defense requirements that they have. And they come out and use that know-how to actually build some commercial products for the world. So you begin to see that they actually are taking that technology but actually solving the problems for the world. In India, we had this very quaint problem where we could serve Indian markets, which are small, and we could also serve the global markets, which are pretty large. But we thought maybe it's a step one and step two. Do India first and then we do the world. Now what we're beginning to see is that not only has the confidence level amongst the entrepreneurs grown significantly, where they're taking the most important problems and apply their knowledge of deep tech, and therefore be able to do those in a much more meaningful way, but also develop it at a cost and scale that becomes applicable to the world from day one. So most of the startups that are actually building these technologies today are, I would say, not very far from where Israel is, if not already there at the level that Israel is doing. So NASCOM, for example, has a deep tech club. The kinds of problems that they solve is absolutely, unthinkable just a couple of years ago. And these guys will only improve, and that flock will only grow. So I don't look at this as a problem for us. I think it is just a matter of time that we needed that evolution to happen. And I think it's all coming together at this point in time. And therefore, I think the kinds of companies that will evolve from here is going to be on par in terms of technology. I think the bigger challenge, as I was telling you, Shailesh, is not technology alone, but their ability to reach the markets and be able to sell to those markets. So if you see in India, we are extremely happy about the fact that within 18 years we are where we are today. Today, when I started my journey in Bangalore in 2005, we had probably about 10, 15 startups, the way we define it today, product startups. Today we have 13,000 startups in Bangalore alone, and several of them are product startups. So if you look at a lot of these startups, they are mostly B2C. They talk about their successes being able to serve the Indian markets. They are unicorns. We have 45 unicorns in Bangalore alone. So I think the numbers are very, very impressive. But how many of the B2B startups are actually solving global problems and serving the global markets? How many companies that are global category leaders out there in the world we can point to and say they came from India? They came from any of the IITs. Not too many. They may be the same IIT sitting in Bay Area, maybe having a much better success at this point. So I think for me, the way I look at it, it's the ability for us to scale these startups onto the global stage will be a great opportunity given where we are today, the inflection point. I think we can actually solve for the technology in any fashion that is required so that we are able to meet the cost requirements and be able to meet the scale requirements.
Thanks, Ravi. And I do have some follow-up questions, but on your point of whether India is going to catch up with at least with Israel, so I think Israel has some 89 unicorns from what I read, and India, we already know that we have crossed way beyond 100. So although the scale doesn't scale up because India is much bigger the size of Israel, but in terms of absolute numbers, we are going to be there. The question that we need to ask is, how many of these startups are focusing on deep tech versus how many of these startups are aggregators or solving social problems? So before I ask you that, going to you, Abhishek, and maybe the hardest question I reserved for you, because you have been on both sides of the table on the investment side, right? So you have tried to build up a deep tech startup like we were talking, and I have seen that firsthand myself when I was trying to foray into AR/VR startups and got the resistance from funding perspective, because VCs, to be to talk euphemistically, is they are not very excited when we talk about long-term deep tech vision, and you have seen that, right? And now you are on the other side of the table. So from those learning of how much have you seen the deep tech startup evolving in those last 7, 8, 10 years, and what you are doing as an investor now to focus and to encourage these startups without compromising on the ROI side?
Thanks a lot, Salesh. Fantastic question. And first of all, I would like to thank the panel and the audience to sort of give us the opportunity to share our ideas, right? As Salesh and I were discussing, we also happen to have the common interest of AR/VR. And I think as an investor, as well as being on the other side as an erstwhile entrepreneur and my prior stint as an investment banker, I think one of the key learning that I've had is that technology in silo is not going to be sort of widely adopted unless and until you have an eye on the opportunity side, which is the market and the timing. And timing plays a crucial role. So 2015, when I was doing deep tech, at that point of time, VCs were not really having the kind of patient capital from their LP side in terms of the tenure or the duration, right? And to get an idea of duration, right? I mean, let's look at the bank, right? I mean, you put in a fixed deposit of 3 years. Against that, if the bank actually lends out 10 years, right, there can be a bank run. So you have to keep that duration perspective in mind when you look at the VC or the funding pool. Interestingly enough, right now I think we are at the cusp of the biggest opportunity of our lifetime. I've been hearing India shining for the last 20 years. Most of us actually stayed back in India because of that. But now I can tell you that India is shining in because of two factors. There are two pools of opportunity, and I'll tie that down to deep tech in a bit, Sailesh. I know you focus more on the cutting edge side of it. But I think the two biggest opportunity is one is the consumption story has just started, and because of the unique geopolitics and the demographic situation in India, the consumption is here to stay. People are going to come up the sort of income ladder, and the opportunity to solve for India B, or the Bharat story as we sort of call it within the investing parlance, that is a big opportunity, right? I mean, it has to be inclusive, both from the perspective of enabling the Bharat story, whether through regional sort of media or through the India stack or through a lot of other sort of technology that you can use and leverage to make it more and more frictionless for them to come up, increase their productivity, and also consume. Right? It's a cycle. More the consumption, more the money velocity, more the GDP, more your share of the stature in the world economy. So I think that is a very unique opportunity which is only going to grow very secularly, and that has ramifications across the board. And I'll come to those sectors, but the top ones, I think fintech is already there, and much to the credit of the government. ONDC, the e-commerce story, the sort of tier 2, tier 3 sort of story, the regional sort of inclusion. Health tech is still completely unsolved in my view. Ed tech or education, especially at the primary to secondary level, is still unsolved. And let's not look at the IIT or the NITs as the shining example. We also need to make it inclusive for a far bigger sort of proportion of population. So I think that is where cutting edge technologies will play a big role. And a couple of years back, I was meeting someone who is known to be a big mind in AI. And when I asked him, what is the biggest sort of suggestion that you have for us Indians? He said, cost arbitrage is done with. That's not your story. Your story is data story, right? You have a data arbitrage right now. So that's one big part of it. The other part of it is what you touched upon, Ravi, which is the unique opportunity to build in India and sell globally. Particularly by way of SaaS, dev tools, DevSec tools, developer security tools, right? That is a big opportunity, and I've seen that very closely. Both as an entrepreneur as well as a fundraiser or a M&A guy on the other side. 20 years back, people used to sort of come up with solutions on SaaS, right? On CRM. The sort of easier solutions which you can build over here with leveraging very sort of simplified developer techniques and probably a call center on the support side and the sales side. Station a few people in the US and sell it. The confidence with a lot of developers and product guys staying back in India has increased, and now I see a lot of focus on deep tech, a lot of patient capital coming in, and the patient capital will mostly come from the domestic pools, right? I mean, people who have stayed over here, who have been ex-entrepreneurs. We heard Chris earlier in the day, right? I think my personal view, I mean, domestic capital will provide the patient capital for more and more deep tech stories. But in terms of deep tech, and as Google also, right? I mean, so that developer ecosystem, making sure that we build and invest in the deep tech ecosystem over here, also sort of lies very high in our priority list. I mean, Bharat is more of our consumption, is more of our day-to-day business, because that's where we make our money from. So that obviously we'll be investing in. But for the global ecosystem, I think developer tools, which is coming up very fast, and it could be a lot of areas, right? I mean, in AR/VR, for example, industrial application is where metaverse is finding the biggest sort of application. So you have to first identify what is the problem that you're solving. And in India, the good thing is that there are so many challenges, so many problems that you can solve, pick up anything and solve it. For the global story, I think the time for just looking at cost arbitrage is passé. Will become very, very expensive very soon, in my view. You have to look at the sort of arbitrage that we have in talent terms and then solve the global stories. And I think there we still have a long way to go in terms of where our talent pool is versus the opportunity that we can tap.
Thanks, Abhishek. So, not talking about the.
I just want to remind you we have 10 more minutes. If you want to spend some time for the audience, then you have 5 minutes. Sorry, and yeah, after that also we would, like if the panelists can spend time with the audience and talk to them off stage.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. This question I'll throw open to the entire panelists whoever wants to answer. But when we talk about the ecosystem for innovation, we have the holy trinity of academia, the big tech enterprises, as well as startups. So, whose prerogative it is to, and I'll stick again, Abhishek, to cutting edge technologies. Whose prerogative is to think and envision what should be those futuristic technologies that we should focus on, and who should take the lead on doing the basic research. Of course, the big tech will prioritize them, but whose prerogative is to do the basic research and create some technologies out of non-existent work right now? Is it startups? Is it academia? What are the gaps? Atul, you want to take a shot at first?
Yeah, so, any kind of innovation, especially radical innovation, needs three things. Needs capital, markets, and talent. We have talent. Capital, I think as we spoke about, is we need more patient capital, right? And we need domestic sources of patient capital. And actually, we have a lot of communities that are working on that, like unlocking family offices and all, because some of this needs to be outside the conventional VC cycles, 10, 15-year bets, right? So that is one. Secondly, coming back to opportunity, on the market thing, until we have a reasonable domestic market, innovation will always be shallow. It's very hard to build everything sitting here off the back of, the US, which is, 80-90% of consumption. So I think what's changing now is, with this polarized world also, and if you look at areas like cybersecurity, multi-trillion market, I think I agree. I think we have a very good start in India in terms of cybersecurity. That is a huge opportunity to build for India and globally. Defense tech, global defense tech market is 2-3 trillion. It's just like the IT market. And now all of that is transitioning to technology. It's not about building large-scale weapon systems like aircraft carriers, manned aircraft. It's all about autonomous and AI and all of that, right? So India is, I think, number one, number two importer of defense technology. So huge opportunity, consumption in India. Similarly, ISRO has shown us, right, space tech. So I think India through PSUs and government and all is going to become a bigger buyer for this disruptive tech, which should drive more innovation. Now coming back to quickly to what you are pointing out, until we invest in research, and I think Chris Gopalakrishnan covered all the angles there, we will remain reasonably shallow. And for that, we need basically industry-academia collaboration. It's very simple. At the end of the day, we want more rupees flowing from industry to research and academia and more IP coming back to industry. And how does that happen today? The basic problem is that they don't talk to each other. Of course, with all due respect, with good exceptions, right? And I think that's what we need to unlock. And, for example, I'm part of several communities where we have hundreds of professors from IITs, ISC, tier 2, tier 3 academia, right? And we have people from industry. The whole idea is, like an Indian startup that's scaling, can they put 5-10 lakh check into some area of research, right? To a professor, students and all, right? Can we fund scientific innovation, right? And I think that dance needs to happen just like Silicon Valley was born, right? And that was again triggered through defense, DARPA, right? 50s, 60s. So I think that same playbook in a very different fashion, in Indian fashion, needs to play out here. And I think we are starting to see the beginnings of that. And people like Chris, who are big champions, that's their big message to the to the rest of the country. Right? Invest in research, put the scientists on a pedestal, have more PhDs, have more visiting professors, professors of practice. So all of these, this sort of marriage and dating needs to happen between both sides, and then we'll see some outcomes.
Quick question to you. Thanks a lot. Atul, quick question to you, Ravi. And top two.
Unless you're asking all your questions, what about the audience?
That's the last question. Pick top two startups that we should watch out for in the deep tech.
So just to add something to what Atul said, so the way when we were building the ecosystem in Hyderabad, we were sitting in IIIT Hyderabad. There was a lot of good research coming out of that place. The question was, okay, do the researchers become startups or the startups do research? So I think it was very important for us to define the roles of the ecosystem players and say, research guys have to keep on doing their stuff and do it absolutely wonderfully well, do it at world class like Chris talked about. The startups, on the other hand, have the propensity to go take risks and find problems to solve. And therefore, they are in the driver's seat. And the payload that they take in there is all the great research that is sitting in various labs and see what is applicable to each of the problems that they find. They have the propensity to take risks. They have the propensity to find niche areas to solve, open up new markets. That's what their job is. So let the startups take the lead on that front. Similarly, on the corporate side, corporates, the way they are going to live today is not the way they're going to live tomorrow. If they are not going to be innovating very, very fast, they're going to be fading away into obscurity soon. So the only way they can survive is to actually work with the startups. The problem statements come from them. They are dealing with a changing market, so rapidly changing that they need to have new products and new solutions, every other month, every 6 months. So if they don't collaborate with startups, they're not going to survive. So I think that's the demand side, and this is the supply side. I think startups can play a fantastic role in that, in that part. And just to answer your question, Shailesh. So one of the things, as I talked about cost and scale, what we are beginning to see, I work very closely with startups in the assistive technology space. And here the costs are even more under strain. The people in the disability space do not have the same spending power as the regular consumers. They need very sophisticated technology, but they need it at a very cheaper price. So how do you actually make this thing happen and also solve for a market that is quite fragmented? It's not easy to reach through just advertisements or through a regular channel partner. So how do you solve for this? And Indian startups today, we have about 450 to 500 startups that are solving problems for the disability space. Now, those are applicable anywhere in the world because of the cutting edge technology that they're actually employing to solve these problems, to address these two issues. And at the same time, they now have solutions not just for the global disability market, but what we've also found is the same disability solutions can also be for the temporarily disabled people who actually come out of hospitals, need some rehabilitation for a while. That is a great market for them, which is highly lucrative, and so is the aging population market for the same. So, they solve the problem using fantastic technology, but the ability for now to address a much larger market remains in front of them.
Thanks, Ravi. Now, in the interest of time, we'll take questions from the audience.
This is Gaurav, IT 2009. So, with more global companies following China plus one policy and more manufacturing jobs and more manufacturing money coming into India, how do you think the startup world will change in next 10 years?
Nikhil, you want to take this up?
Before I answer that, I quickly want to reply to your question: whose responsibility is it to innovate? Rather than calling it institutes and an industry, make it three-legged. Industry means both sellers and buyers, right? And institutes. So unless all three collaborate, it will not happen. If it is only tech companies with institutes, then you will create something, but there will be no takers for it. So unless it is with a perspective of who are you selling it to. And having worked for SAP in the past, I've seen most of the products of ours that were successful were those that were co-innovated with customers. For example, commodity procurement and sales solution was developed jointly with BHP, right? Maintenance solution was developed with BASF. Okay, only those products which were developed jointly with the industry were successful. Otherwise, there were many of them which didn't see the day of the time. So to answer your question, from manufacturing point of view, innovation coming from various places, we are dividing into three categories. First of all, innovation which is designed and conceptualized in India and developed in India. Designed and conceptualized elsewhere, which most of the global large tech companies are doing, but developed in India. And third is the category where they don't have any support available here in India. They have done some developments overseas. Many such startup companies reach out to us, but they don't have any development, any implementation and support and maintenance capabilities. So we give a lot of weightage to those companies that would have their development capabilities here and who are willing to invest in co-innovation jointly with us and have patience, right? Not be in a hurry to close the deals and have revenues flowing. I know startup companies have a lot of working capital constraints, but having patience and being willing to invest jointly with us is the criteria that we look for. Anything else you can answer?
Okay. Last question.
Can we conclude? I mean, so maybe you can interact with the panelists later because we're already like falling behind.
We were just warming up and.
I know. I think the sessions are very short.
Can we take one last question?
Okay, quick. But the answer should be short.
See, in the context of Make in India, we are often confronted with a situation where people say that, look, the building block levels, you are still importing product. And that is a big problem. And I want to know what is the situation or status where we are able to manufacture the chips and things like that and make it totally Make in India product. How long will that take?
Your question is basically for semiconductor industry. I know, yeah. So I know government is taking a lot of initiative on where India can bridge the gap on semiconductor shortage that the world suffered during the COVID time, and that's where China and Taiwan monopolize, and that's where lies in the big opportunity for India. And I know Vedantu had pitched in partnering with Foxconn, and now Tata has joined the race with Tata Technologies. So there are a lot of work going in this area with the tech leaders like Tata coming into picture and decided to set up a fab in India. And Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, also has said in the past that India and the government will invest a lot in making India, bringing India on the map of semiconductor superpowers. So I believe that has started now, and the vision of the government is there. The big tech is bound up to that, and I think slowly we'll see startups going in and jumping onto the semiconductor area, quantum computing area, and chips innovation, and having India its own big fabs. So I think we are on that journey now already. So I think we have totally run out of time, overshoot the time. So we'll like to conclude. Thanks a lot to the audience, and thanks Aditi.
Thank you, Shailesh. I would